How are you doing? Japan concluded the agreement of TPP in 2017, and the Japanese government has already reported this agreement of TPP to the deposit country New Zealand in 2017, and it has already taken 4 years since this agreement was established by the Japanese government. And TPP is abbreviation of Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is kind of like a comprehensive economic partnership agreement that covers a wide range of agriculture products transaction, and that enables us to deal with so many kinds of agriculture with obstacles of custom duties and liberalize investment and other services among member countries. And the the point at issue about TPP is, I think, agriculture. Agriculture is one of the most important industries that we have to take care of, and the Japanese government must take care of this industry to enhance competitive in the world. So the Japanese government always care about food self-sufficiency rate to achieve the you know competitive competitiveness goal in the world. So and the agriculture, as I said, agriculture is one of the most important industries that needs to be growing, that needs to have more competitiveness in the world, then that needs to be strengthened by the Japanese government. So the Japanese government has always mission to to raise the food sufficiency rate and enhance the competitiveness of agriculture industry in the world. But even in that situation, we Japanese have various preconceptions to the agricultural industries, and the information about agriculture we've got these days is really biased. And today, I just want to talk about food self-sufficiency rates in Japan. It is said that Japan's food self-sufficiency rate is less than 40%, and the people really worry about if we can survive in the situation where import products are cut off because of some reasons like war or something. So the people really worry about the situation that we fall into starvation because of this low self-sufficiency rate, 40%. So, but there is bias in this discussion. There's bias. There's a bias in this discussion in terms of food self-sufficiency rate. So the food sufficiency rate the Japanese government is talking about is calorie-based self-sufficiency rate. In short, the government apparently compare the amount of calories compare the amount of calories of produced agricultural product to the amount of calories that people take a day. So, and it reveals we've got only 40%. So, the Japanese government always publicize the information of calorie-based food self-sufficiency rate, and it reveals we've got only 40% of food sufficiency rate. And with this percentage, in the meantime, we'll be in trouble. the people really worried about that we are in trouble having the foods, and we are going to be starving because of this low food self-sufficiency rate, 40%. But about some point, um, in some cases, it does make sense, because calorie based food self-sufficiency rate is really easy to understand, and it's much easier for us to understand the highlight of food sufficiency problem in Japan. So the government always indicates the Japan's low sufficiency rate, and they indicate the sense of crisis against this low food self-sufficiency rate all the time. But I think this discussion of food sufficiency rate based on food calories doesn't make sense anyway. And extremely speaking, it is no exaggeration to say this discussion tells us a lie. And I'm just going to introduce you here the formula to let you know how you can get the answer of Japan's calorie-based food self-sufficiency rate. So, denominator is the value that you subtract domestic production and import products from export products, and numerator is domestic production. And this is a production-based data. And you just, if you want to get the answer of calorie-based production rate, you have to replace these each values to calorie-based agriculture production. So the numerator comes to be a calorie-based domestic agriculture production, and denominator comes to be the value that you subtract calorie-based domestic agriculture products and calorie-based imported agriculture products from calorie-based export agriculture products. So this is the formula that derives Japan's food self-sufficiency rate, but it's really complicated. So I just want to say one more time. Denominator is a value that you subtract domestic production and import production from export production. So, and numerator is a domestic production. So, and then when we calculate the self-sufficiency rate, we have to replace each values to calorie-based agriculture production. So, denominator comes to be the value that you subtract calorie-based domestic agriculture production and calorie-based imported agriculture products from calorie-based export agriculture products. And numerator comes to be a calorie-based domestic agriculture products. So this is the formula. This is a formula that derives Japan's food self-sufficiency rate. But there are some problems in food sufficiency rate derived from this formula. So when you say food sufficiency sufficient rate is 37%, so numerator is 843 kilocalories, which is defined by the Ministry of Agriculture in 2021. According this is a according to the survey by the by the Ministry of Agriculture in 2021, and denominator is as I said, the value that you subtract the domestic agriculture production and imported products from export products. So this value is 2,294 kilocalories, which is also defined by the Ministry of Agriculture in 2021. But do Japanese people, every single Japanese person from babies to old gentlemen and ladies consume 2,294 kilocalories every day. So if it's real, I think depending on the person and depending on the situation, there's a problem with eating habits. So it is too much. Actually, this 2,294 kilocalories is derived from this formula, but this amount of calories that we Japanese take per day is averagely only 1,840 kilocalories, whose value is calculated and publicized by the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare in 2021. And if you set this 1,840 kilocalories that we Japanese take per day to denominator, even if numerator is even if 843 kilocalories, which is set to the domestic production as numerator, the food self-sufficiency rate is still 46%. So the percentage that is set to be less than 40% is only according to the calculation percentage. And there is no fact that every single person in Japan take 2,294 kilocalories per day. So this is really weird part of Japan's food self-sufficiency rate. And you just remember again this formula. If you wanted to raise the percentage of food sufficiency rate to 100%, what would you do? So if war starts and the imports are cut off deliberately by the countries, so if war starts and imports are cut off by countries on purpose, and exports are restricted from overseas, domestic production that is naturally produced in Japan. In short, Japan's self-sufficiency rate is gonna be 100%. However, just imagine the case when imports are cut off perfectly because of war. Probably people are really in trouble having the food, and it causes starvation in our society. So even assuming that food self-sufficiency rate becomes 100%, Japanese people will experience starvation. So I'm really wondering if it's okay for Japanese government to set such a percentage as policy goal. For example, in in 2008 there was decrease in imports of butter from overseas, and so many restaurants in Japan, so many pastry shops in Japan were struggling to find the butters in Japan. And as a result, the value of imports that partly compose denominator reduced. However, even even if the value of denominator reduced overall because of decrease in the imports of butter, there was nothing that affected domestic production because imports are imports, right? Imports are imports. And this factor is not something produced in Japan. So, in spite of this fact, the food sufficiency rate raised by 1%, even in spite of the case that the imports are reduced, because this importing factor is as I said, was not affected to food production, because this factor is not something produced in Japan. Imports are imports. So this is because simply products weren't. This is because, as I said, simply products were imported, and denominator got smaller as a result, and naturally, food self-sufficiency rate increased. So the Japanese government set a policy goal with this percentage, which has such a paradox in the formula. So that makes no sense. If you see this amount of production by the Japanese agriculture industries with this percentage, the amount of agriculture production in Japan is very, very small. Even though agriculture production, like vegetables, account for 23% of entire agriculture production in Japan, vegetables calories are really low, so that the percentage of calories vegetable percentage of the percentage of vegetables account for out of entire agricultural production is only 6%. So even though vegetables in agriculture production base account for 23%, vegetable in calorie base accounts only for 6%. So I really feel skeptical that the Japanese government has a clear indication to set a policy goal in terms of food self-sufficiency rate.